Number 1. The Knock. I grew up in a house that was out in the country, on a ridge that was over an hour's drive from the nearest town. I didn't really consider myself a country boy because I wasn't into that sort of music or outdoor stuff and living. I was just someone who grew up in an area where instead of people, there were lots of hills and trees. Our dad had a really good job, and our house was built specifically for he and my mom, so we were the only people to ever live in it. There were other houses in the area, but no one that we really knew. Plus those houses were mostly always a bit of a drive away from ours. Nothing strange ever happened there until when I was 13 years old. It had to be in the middle of the night, and everyone had been asleep. There was a really loud knocking at the front door that woke everyone in the house up. I hadn't even heard anyone knock on the door like that before, and rarely had anyone ever knocked anyway. There was the door by the garage of the house that all of our friends and relatives could just walk into at any time, and that is how everyone came into the home. I got up and walked out into the hallway. Everyone was up, but it was my dad who was making his way over to the door. I followed sort of lazily behind him, while my sister and my mom both just remained at their doors. I was right by Dad when he opened the door and looked out. He turned the front porch light on at first, which we never left on at night. When he opened the door and looked out, he didn't see anyone out there at all. This seemed weird for several reasons. First, we had a very long driveway. Someone on foot wouldn't have been able to get out of the yard before my dad got to the door, unless they were extremely fast runners. Also, since all the houses were a drive away from the other houses, no one who drove could have gotten back into their car and backed out without us having seen them doing it. My dad was really confused, and he stood out on the porch for a few moments. I guess being woken up had irritated him enough that he had to have a cigarette. I didn't want to smell it, so I went back to my bedroom. There was nothing left to see out there. I had never turned the light on in my bedroom at all that night. I hated how it hurt my eyes to do that, and I was able to make my way out into the hall without doing it. My sister and my parents had both turned the lights on in their respective rooms. I was laying in bed when I heard my dad come back in the front door. My bedroom was the closest to the front door, so I could pretty clearly hear him talking to my mom. He told her that as he had been standing on the porch, he noticed that there were footprints in the mud in front of the house leading to the front door. Again, this was weird because, literally, no one ever came to the front door for any reason. What my dad told her next, though, was something even stranger. There wasn't a set of footprints leading back away from the door, though. I felt a little chill go through me when I heard that. It was kind of like feeling that you feel when you hear the twist at the end of an urban legend. But seriously, I didn't immediately think that there was much scary about it. I then saw something which definitely made it scary for me. It was only for a quick moment, but I saw someone outside of the house, under my window. They had peeked up really quickly into my room, before trying to quickly hide under the window again. I didn't know if they had seen me or not, and if they did, I bet they felt that way about me too. I didn't yell out to announce my presence, but I did get up and run out of the room. I ran into the living room to my dad and let him know what I had seen. I told him that it had to be whoever had knocked on the door earlier. He went over to the fireplace and grabbed a poker. I wanted to ask him why he didn't go into his room and get his gun, but I didn't have any time to ask my dad anything. As he stormed out the front door, after he had gone out, I heard someone yelling outside. Then I heard my dad yell back, and there was some noise that sounded like fighting. My mom was scared, and she ran over to the phone to call 911. I just stood there, not knowing if there was any way that I could help. The person who had been hiding under my window had gotten injured from my dad hitting him with a poker, but he still managed to get away from my dad and run out of the yard, down to the road. My dad did not follow him. When the man was eventually arrested, we discovered what happened that night. He had been knocking on doors to see if anyone in the house would wake up from the knocks. If not, he knew that they were sound sleepers, and he could then get into the house and rob them, with little fear of waking them up. He had hid by my window because it was the only one that hadn't had the light on when he had woken us up. Number 2, the closet. I never made friends very easily, but I wasn't one of the children that was just fine with that. I always wanted to have friends, and growing up, I would usually try my hardest to try to keep relationships with others. It didn't really work out really well though, so after a while I just stopped trying. When I was a teenager and I got a car, I started making a few friends. I really didn't think back then that they may have been using me for the car, but even if I knew that they had been, it wouldn't have mattered to me. It was nice to finally have some people who at least acted like they enjoyed having me around. I went to a few parties sometimes and met more people. Really, after I turned 16, it really seemed that my world had changed. At one point, even this girl Katie, that I always liked, had gone out on a date with me once. It didn't really click between us, so it never went past that first date, but it was still a monumental turning point in my life, I thought. Not long after that, I got invited to a weekend at a cabin in the woods with some of the popular kids in school. It was a surprise to me, but I guess it shouldn't have been, since Katie was really popular with that group. There were about 10 people there altogether, including myself. The cabin was a bit run down, which surprised me. That popular group of friends had money, and I had thought the property was something that one of them owned. I found out later that it wasn't. It was something one of the jock's older brothers had come across, and that crowd would use it for parties. They had no idea who really owned the place, but supposedly they thought it was abandoned, because no one had ever caught them when they were there. It was nice, but there was only one thing that really bugged me. There was a door that had a padlock on it, and it was a solid door too. The lock itself was really rusted, but it was solid as well. It didn't look like it was something that could be broken off very easily. I never asked anyone in the cabin what was behind that door, because my guess was that no one had any idea. They also probably didn't care, since it doesn't look like anyone had tried to break into it. On the very first night there, I had to get up and go to the bathroom. And yeah, this meant going outside since there was an outhouse. It didn't bother me, but I felt like I was sleepwalking while I made my way out there. On the way back, I passed by the locked door. I stopped and looked at it strangely. When I thought, I heard something coming from behind it. It sounded like someone was inside of the closet, or a room, or whatever the door led to, and it sounded like they were slowly scraping their fingernails down and along the inside of the wooden door. The noise started around the middle of the door, and then slow scrape down for a while, and then it would start all over again. After that, I went back to bed. I was sleepy enough that I really didn't think much about it being strange until morning. I know that probably sounds weird, but a lot of times I'm sure that some of us have been half asleep and we either seen or heard something weird, but haven't given it much thought. I really forgot about it until morning. That was when one of the other girls mentioned she heard some noises coming from behind the door when she got up for some water during the night. There were 4 of us all together. who had gotten up for some reason, passed by that door and heard something, some sort of noises coming from it. One of the guys was curious as to what could be behind the door. He searched around until he found an old hatchet. He used it to try to break the padlock off of the door. It took a lot of effort for the lock to break off. I was thinking and expecting it to be an animal or something else in there, but when we opened the door, it was a closet. There was nothing in it at all. Not only that, but there were no holes in the wall or the floor, either for an animal to get in or out. But the four of us knew that we had heard something behind that door. Well, this is where the story gets really weird. The following night, every one of us heard sounds like the four of us had heard that one night, but no one was hearing it from behind that closet door. Those sleeping in the room I was in heard it from the closet in our room, and those in the other bedrooms heard it from their closet. Those sleeping in the living room heard it from the closet in the front room. All in all, the noises had gone from that one closet to all the others, as if opening the hall closet had let something out. We had left the next day, so I had no way of knowing if this phenomena continued or not. I also never went back to that cabin, even though I was invited. Number 3. The cabin. Before we were married, my wife and I decided to rent a cabin for a week's vacation. We weren't big outdoors people, really. We were just looking for somewhere with some peace and quiet for a little while. When we drove out to the cabin from the local town that it was outside of, it was probably about a 45-minute drive away from the town. I had to know that because I often liked to get fresh things from the store and was willing to drive back to town every day in order to do that, and if I had to ensure that they were fresh. On the very first day that we were out there for the whole day, I drove into town to buy some things to make us a nice dinner with. When I drove back, I was surprised to see that there was someone standing on the porch with my wife. She was sitting on the porch swing, reading a book, which is exactly where she had been when I left. I had absolutely no idea who the guy was, though. After I parked the car and walked up to the porch, I looked over at my wife. She gave me this look that I knew very well. The look was telling me that she wasn't comfortable with this guy being there, and she wanted me to find a way to get rid of him. I tried getting rid of the guy, and for a few minutes nothing worked. Finally, I announced that we were going in to make dinner. When I did this, the guy finally got the picture and he left. I asked my wife who he was. She told me he was just a guy who also had a cabin out in the area, though unlike us, he owned his, and he lived out there. He had seen her, then come up to our cabin and began chatting and made her uncomfortable. I told her he was probably just someone who was out alone all the time and was just craving company. The next day I drove to town again to get some fresh food. It wasn't until I was maybe a fourth of the way back from town that I looked down at the gas gauge. I was shocked to see that it was almost empty. I had remembered there being plenty of gas in the car before, but then I began thinking about whether or not I had filled it up the first time we were in town. I turned around. Then I went to the station for some gas and filled up the tank. When I got back to the cabin, I expected to see my wife out on the porch, reading like she had been. It had been such a beautiful day outside, I couldn't imagine her not out there, but she wasn't. That wouldn't have been too weird, except that when I got closer to the cabin, I noticed that the front door was open. I got out of the car and walked up to the cabin. I heard something break on the inside, and then I ran inside. In the kitchen area of the cabin, I saw the creepy man from earlier, and he had my wife backed up into a corner, and she looked scared to death. I yelled something to the guy, but I don't remember what. When he turned and looked at me, He looked very confused for some reason, but that only lasted for a short moment. He moved slightly away from my wife, which actually gave her room to reach into one of the nearby drawers, where she grabbed the knife and slashed the guy's hand. After reacting to the stab, the guy ran past me to get out the front door of the cabin. I just let him go because I decided it was best to just let the police handle him, and I needed to make sure that my wife was okay. Talking to her, I learned something that chilled me to the bone. She had tried to get away from him when he was coming on to her and made her way into the cabin. He prevented her from closing the door and followed her in. When she told him I'd be back at any minute, he told her that I wouldn't. He had siphoned most of the gas from our car, so I would run out, either going to town or coming back. Since cell reception around here was so bad, I had little chance of getting to a gas station quickly. That was just the most bizarre thing I had ever heard. But when police came later, we noticed that gasoline had been poured out on the ground on the far side of our yard, and there was damage to the fuel door on the car. The police knew who the guy was. We didn't even have to give them a description. This wasn't the first time. He had done some creepy stuff like that before. He was arrested for aggravated assault and a few other things. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. First of all, I'd like to thank all my paid Patreon members, starting with my 2 VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper 8. I also want to thank Heidi H, Chronic J, Stinky News, EricaOdd, Tracy, Sellars, Kelli, Clark, and Broken Angel. Yeah, I know you guys are probably surprised to be getting a second video in 3 days, but I've been able to get more stories lately, and I've been feeling that they're different enough that I can kind of put them together and get them out to you guys more, so I hope you enjoyed that. And like I told some people the other day, you might see some different things coming up, like some shorts on my channel. Just enjoy them if you want to. Don't worry about them if you don't enjoy shorts. I'm still going to be doing these long videos, so that's no problem. And just thanks for supporting me, everybody. And if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat and you'd like to be, please hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of new content. Leave me a comment, which I'll do my best to get back to, and consider sharing the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you want narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. And now I'd like to mention all my free Patreon members: Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, Evil Black Cat, Lori Hicks, Lisa Herman, Krystal Robin, Hillbilly 13, RhettSchall, John Tull, Baby and Baby, Sherry Hubbard, Vina Waldren, Pumpkin Moo and Pepper 2. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.